What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another review by me, Jay Christ. Before we get into it, please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you like this type of content and want to see it from me first, and comment down below what you think game we're talking about today, the gameplay I got in the background, my thoughts on the reviews, whatever. But today we are talking about the new Warhammer 40,000 game, Space Marines 2. Now, to preface this, I didn't even know Warhammer was a thing until this game's roll out. And I've never played any of it, and I went and read the summary of the plot for the first game, but I have not dove into Warhammer lore at all. So we're going to be talking about this as someone who's in. This is their introduction to the Warhammer universe. So I won't be able to point out, hey, this didn't seem right, or that didn't seem right, or this doesn't line up with the lore, the universe, whatever. But we're going to be talking about gameplay, how the game felt, and all of that. I thought this was an awesome game. I had a lot of fun playing this. The gameplay is really good. The mechanics are fun. The enemies are fun. The story's dramatic. It's definitely a game that I would recommend. This, I don't know what the opinion is on the Warhammer community as a whole, but I thought this was a fun way to jump into the Warhammer universe, and I might check out other games in the future. I'm not a tabletop game type of guy, so that probably won't be happening, but I might check out other games, read up on stuff, watch some YouTube videos. Don't know. We'll see on that, but definitely a really fun game. Got good mechanics. I think it's pretty beginner friendly. It's a little bit difficult at times. I played on normal mode, and I did go down a handful of times throughout my playthrough, but nothing crazy hard. Now, of course, it was on regular difficulty, which is the second easiest, so there's that. But the gameplay's fun, the mechanics are fun, easy to play, quick to learn. At times the controls can be a little wonky if you play a lot of other games, like switching weapons was on the D-pad and not Y or triangle, which, can be a little odd, but it is what it is. Definitely a good game, definitely something I recommend trying out. But as usual, we're going to run through our cons, our so-sos, and then our pros. The first con is that there is no summary, no video, nothing to read in game of even the first Space Marines game, let alone the whole Warhammer universe or the Warhammer lore, since this is something that's been around for so long, and this seems like it's probably the most popular, at least video game, but it's such a deep world that has been developed for a couple decades now in Warhammer. It would be nice to have just a quick rundown of the lore or the universe that this game is set in, or just anything to familiarize yourself with it. And then I think the first Warhammer Space Marines game came out in 2011. So even if you played that back in 2011, you might have forgot, and it'd be nice to refresh, catch up on what's going on, or what went on in the universe so far. Reintroduce you to Titus, the main character in this game. I think it would be really helpful. And if you watch any of my reviews, I always go over stuff like wanting tutorials or training modes or something like this, where you can catch up on the lore of previous games if it matters. The biggest issue I had with this game was the way it used resources. I put it down as resource heavy, but as I researched more and figured out more, I had trouble getting decent frames. I have a 3080, and I can tell you in 2 seconds. I have a 3080 GPU and an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X, and I was at times dropping down to 14 frames, I think was the lowest I got. And in actual gameplay, non-cutscenes, the highest I ever got was like 50. It renders in a crazy amount of enemies. The environments are crazily detailed. It is a beautiful game, which we'll talk about more, but it was having trouble getting frames at all. And as I researched things, apparently this game is very CPU dependent, and that's where the bottleneck is. And for a game where they put in so much effort to make the game look good, and where your system, whether you're on console or PC, has to render in so many details and so many enemies that you have to fight. And there's just constant, not only enemies and details, but then they attack, so you have to be able to render if they shoot stuff at you, when you're shooting back, when the soldiers around you or your fellow Space Marines are shooting. Like, it's all the stuff that has to render. And they made it very CPU dependent, and the bottleneck is at the CPU, where it should be at the GPU. And then the most frustrating part of that is, no matter how I change graphic settings, I played on medium forever. And if you go to my single player channel, which if you want to watch the gameplay or the playthrough, that's where that is. You'll see me complain about frames a lot. You'll see me mess with the settings, and my frames don't get any better or worse. I played on medium the first day I played this for a few hours, and then I switched it to like all low settings. later through my playthrough, and I changed it back to medium settings because the frames weren't changing. So the way it uses resources is not great, and the settings in the game don't change that. Now, of course, I was also streaming and recording at the same time, so it does hurt a little bit, but if I played this off stream or even on stream and not recording, it would not surprise me if I got 40, 50 frames max, where even in Warzone on Urzikstan, at my lowest, I'm getting 90 to 100 on 1440p with like all medium settings, where you're rendering in, 100 to 120 players at once, an entire map all gets rendered in, and I get way better frames. I get better frames in Apex, which have detailed looking environments where you're loading in 60 players on big maps, and I get 165 frames, which was where I capped it because of my monitor. And so it was really disappointing to see such a beautiful game be ruined by low and unstable FPS. The two lesser cons that I have are, one, just the way that voices sound when they're over Vox, as they called it, but it's the radio voice lines just was like very gritting to my ear. It's a really small thing, and it's more of a me problem, but I just didn't like the way it sounded. The way they just did static over the voice just was grating to my ear, and I wasn't a fan. And the other thing was everything is hold to interact, and there is no setting that's tap to interact. Now, that might just be because I'm an impatient BR player, where in Apex and Warzone, I have tap to reload, and any multiplayer games, tap to prioritize interact is what it's called on Warzone, but essentially where everything's tap, both to reload and interact, but it prioritizes interact, but everything on interact was hold to interact, which took, a good second to interact with anything, except for the small ammo boxes and the syringes to heal. But like if you needed a full reload ammo, or you only had the big ammo boxes to reload and you were low health and you just needed to grab ammo really quick, sometimes it really cost you in a fight. Or just me being impatient with having to hold to interact doors because I'm just used to games doing instant interact. So it's just a small thing that I didn't like. So that's it for the cons. We had the no summary of the game or the lore, the way the game uses resources for graphics, the radio voices, and the hold to interact instead of just tap to interact. Our so-sos are a much quicker discussion, but the health and the healing system, so-so. I like that it increases the difficulty, but I felt like it was so hard to maintain your max health. If you haven't played this game, and I don't know how it's been in the other Warhammer games, but you have your armor bar and your health bar. Your armor bar is 3 little bars, and as long as you stop taking damage for a few seconds, it can always fully charge up. But the way your health works is it's this red bar that you can see in the top left of the gameplay behind me, and as it goes down, there's a white bar that follows, and if you don't get kills on enemies to regen up to that white bar in time, that white bar will keep shrinking down to a certain level, and then that becomes your total health cap until you get through the combat area. And sometimes that really led to death. And there is syringes around, which when you pop a syringe, it ups your max health. Or if you use your, God, I forget what they call it, your ultimate, essentially, in this game, with Titus, it'll recharge your health all the way. So it's not a huge deal, and it does add to the difficulty, which is good. But there was times where I'm like, hey, there's no combat. I'm just moving through the map. Why isn't my health regen? Sometimes we would health regen under cutscenes. And I, after playing this campaign for 7.5 hours, I still felt confused at times. The next is that this is even the main campaign. There is another mode which I'll play and review later, but the main campaign is definitely designed for co-op, which is great because we don't have enough co-op campaigns these days. I think co-op, obviously couch co-op, but co-op in general has been kind of a lost art in the gaming world, which is unfortunate because not everybody wants to play PvP with their friends. Not everyone wants to play the style of PvE like Helldivers, where there is lore to it, but you're not advancing through a story. Not everybody wants to play PvE like that. Sometimes people just want to go through a story like we used to in the old days. Playing a campaign mode with their friends, and luckily there is missions that you can do here that do advance or give you more lore, but the main story is so co-op focused, and you could tell in moments where you're like in boss fights or you're in big swarm battles, which is another thing that we'll talk about, and you would end up being like, man, it seems like the heavy enemies or the bosses are really targeting me, and you'd be like, yeah, they are like targeting the real player. And I'm sure if you play with other players, it probably attacks whoever's damaging them the most, but I would be doing like no damage, and my AI counterparts would be shooting at a boss, and the boss is like chasing me around the whole time, and I'm like, hey, go focus on them. And sometimes it would switch focus, but the bosses would spend the majority of the time focusing on me, so I had like no time to heal, especially because while you're fighting bosses, waves of enemies come in, and so there was that. There was times where like I would be fighting for my life and I look and my two AI counterparts are just standing there. Whereas if you're playing co-op, they never just stand there. And I think that's due to the co-op nature and the co-op design of this game, which, you know, I've been playing single player games my whole life, and you usually don't run into that, especially nowadays. But because the game wants those players or those AI counterparts to actually be controlled by players, I think that's where the problem came in. And so I mentioned during boss fights that you would get swarms of enemies, and that was kind of one of my so-sos here. I think my biggest negative of the actual gameplay or the logic that they put into this game is that sometimes it's like swarm fighting simulator, which is great, but at times it would feel like you advance through a mission. Okay, now I got to fight through this other swarm. Now I advance through the mission. Now I'm just fighting another swarm. Now I advance through the mission. Now I'm just fighting another swarm. Oh, boss fight. And while the boss fight is happening, swarms are coming in. Instead of like moving through and clearing enemies at times or just trying to get to objective, it just felt like, okay, when's the next swarm? When am I fighting the next swarm? Which, you know, is part of the game because it's in the lore. The Tyranids are invading, and then the heretics also are, you know, they're invading. They're trying to attack the Space Marines and the planets that you're on. And so it's an invasion, and that makes sense why there'd be swarm after swarm because they're trying to invade and take over. So logically within the lore, it makes sense. And that's why it's just on so-sos and not cons, but sometimes gameplay gets tiring of just fighting waves and waves and waves and over again, or you just want to advance the story and get through missions. There's nothing wrong with the combat itself, but sometimes it just got a little tiresome and tedious just fighting wave after wave. And then my final so-so is the photo mode. I love when games have photo mode. I usually use them for thumbnails. I didn't for this game because this photo mode, well, it looks good. There's a lot of controls, like you can put helmet on or off. You can change Titus's facial expression. There's filters on it. All of that is really good and made me want to put it into pros. But there is just no in-game keybind, controller bind, or mechanic to actually take the photos. What you're expected to do is change the facial expression, change the helmet, put on filters, change the camera angle, whatever, and then use Xbox screenshots or PlayStation screenshots or PC screenshots. And so it's a photo mode that doesn't take photos. It's more of a scenery setup mode or a photo pose mode. And then your actual device that you're gaming on is what your actual camera is. And I'm just like, why put a photo mode in that doesn't auto take pictures? I mean, if you've watched through my gameplays on my single player channel, you see me stop and do photo mode. And then it just does photos on its own. And I always appreciate that. So finally, just to wrap up our so-sos, we had the health/healing system I was so-so on, the co-op design of the main campaign that I was so-so on, the non-stop fighting swarms, and then the photo mode. And so going into pros, start off with the most obvious pro if you're watching this is the graphics. The game is super detailed. The environments are super gorgeous. The enemies, the players, all of that really detailed. A beautiful game that I wish I could have played in higher FPS. And if you have a machine for it, definitely play this game on Ultra. This game is gorgeous, super detailed, super wonderful to look at. And at times I would just mentally be admiring the scenery while playing the game. The next is the gun and the melee system. I like that there's like a mechanic in there that combines them where when you melee with your charge melee or your combo melee, that there would be a crosshair that was placed on the enemy's head, and then you could pull like right trigger or R2 if you're on controller, and it would do an animation where it would do a high damage shot to that enemy. I liked that the guns felt really good in the game. There was a little bit of recoil, but not out of control. And then they did have bloom, which was obviously the crosshairs, which, you know, I'm not a big fan of bloom in multiplayer, which I haven't played this multiplayer, although I assume it's in there. But bloom adds just a little bit of skill and a little difficulty, and also changes your gun selection, because you can't be using like the close range weapons for far range enemies and be able to just spray them down. So it adds a little bit of skill ceiling. It adds, or skill floor, whatever you want, however you want to describe it. It adds a little bit of more strategic thought in your weapon choice, and I like that. And then the melees were just fun. They had 4 different types of melees: the thunder hammer, the combat knife, the the blades, or the saw blade, whatever they called it, and the heavy sword. My favorites from the combat knife and the thunder hammer, but all of them have cool animations, which we'll talk more about. We'll talk more about in a few minutes when I get to that pro. Which actually I just might make it 2 pros from now. But that was really fun. The guns and the melee weapons all felt really good, and I enjoyed that. The combat was very simple, although it was intense with the swarms and the hordes of enemies. It was very simple. There was a parry mechanic, which we'll talk more about. There was shooting your gun, there was using your melee weapons, and then there was fun executions, all stuff we'll talk about. But the combat system wasn't overly complicated. The parry timing wasn't incredibly difficult, and the combat system was really good. Speaking of the parry system, with the parry system, it would highlight the enemy in blue, and for the sword wielding or some of the bosses, you had to time your parries. But like if an enemy was just going to launch themselves at you, you could just click the parry when the blue happened, and then it was like the Tyranids, it would grab their tail and slam them to the ground or do different animations. And the animations were really cool, and the parries were easy to use. And then you also have execution animations where once you've worn down an enemy enough, they kind of freeze for a second or two and they glow red, and you can go up and you can execute them. All 4 of the melee weapons have their own unique execution animations. All of the unique enemies have their unique execution enemies. Every boss fight you get to end with an execution, which is a long animation, but a lot of fun. The animations in this game during your combat moves were wonderful. Loved them. Another mechanic during combat that was really good was the revive mechanic. Because this is a co-op campaign, and if you could be the best Warhammer player in the world, playing with the worst Warhammer player. You don't want to fail a mission because the worst Warhammer player in the world goes down, and that's just the end of them, or they have to sit out the rest of the mission. There's a revive mechanic, and even when you play the campaign solo, your AI teammates are able to revive you, which is super nice. Another thing is the music in the game. It's really intense. It invokes emotions. It was so akin to how, if this was a movie, how I feel they would do the music. And movie scores do music and playing on your emotions better than anything in the world, in my opinion. And it felt like a movie score. The music was good. It felt like it fit the aura of the game. It felt like it fit the themes of the game. And I really liked the music in it. We're starting to wind down here to some less important stuff. I liked the helmet view, that you could play the whole game. You could change a setting where your characters, either you and your AI counterparts, all wore helmets or didn't wear helmets. I liked the helmet look, but I do like that that's an option, and it's just something small. And also, all of the missions are replayable, so if you're 100%er, you don't have to worry about it first time through, which is super nice. And then the last thing I have on here, which I should have talked about more with the gunner, the melee, is you can go to the armory and select your primary weapon, your secondary weapon, and your melee weapon before you launch into a mission. And some missions have ones unavailable, and other missions have other ones unavailable. But all of the weapons pretty much can be found throughout the map. They have these little like pyramid stands that will have melee weapons, or the different types of primaries, the different types of secondaries. And then you'll also go into rooms before you get into the combat missions, and there'll be weapons laying on big cases that you can go pick up. So you can always change out your weapons if you didn't select good ones, or you just want to keep mixing it up. And then usually there's ammo, grenades, and there's like 3 or 4 different types of grenades, which you don't get to pick going into the mission, but you can pick different ones up as you go through the map. And then there's usually syringes and ammo and all that. So I like that that's all available throughout the map, so you can keep switching things up. You can make sure you refill your ammo, because you do run out of ammo pretty fast in these intense swarm battles. So just to run through things again, the cons were... there's no summary of the first Space Marines game or the lore of the Warhammer world. The way they used resources to run the game and render stuff, I didn't like. The radio voices were grating, which isn't a big deal. And the hold to interact, I just want tap to interact, not a big deal. The so-sos were the health and the healing, the co-op design of the campaign. Wow, I actually thought of one that I didn't have on my list while I was filming this video that I talked about, so you might have to go back for that one. And the photo mode was so-so. And I'm just reading these off in the list that I had them, because they're just as I think of them. And the pros were the graphics, the gun and the melee play, the combat simplicity, the music, the revive mechanic, the parry and the execution animations, which might be my favorite part of the game. The helmet or the non-helmet setting, the replayable missions, and the weapons on the map. Overall, this game was fun. It was a great introduction to in my mind, as someone who knows nobody that plays Warhammer anything. And someone who's never played it. It's a great introduction for me, at least, into the series, with a intense story, great gameplay, great graphics, a game that I definitely recommend. For this campaign, if you ignore the resource heavy stuff, because that's really system dependent, and if you're streaming, recording, all that, I think I would give this game a 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, obviously, so I can't give it a 10 out of 10. I didn't force myself to think of cons and so-sos, but I'm thinking like high 8, like somewhere between 8.5 and a 9, but we don't do that here. We just do halves and wholes. We're going to go with a 9 out of 10 on the Space Marines 2 campaign. Go try it out for yourself. I'll see you in the next review. Have a good day. Bye.
Edge of the observation platform. Amigos will attend to you shortly.
Doubtful.
I hate that I can't jump over things. I'm just impatient. Oh, I don't like that there's ammo here again. There's been so much ammo and grenades. I don't know how I feel about that.
Convictions complete. Awakening systems from hibernation. Light of capacitors initialized. Personnel may begin press.
Not the bad you make a pit stop to the target. I feel that. I always forget things. I don't know if you forgot things, but I always gotta make pit stops that I forgot. It does give Gears of War vibes, for sure. It's part of the reason what made me finally play it. Survive until... Oh my god. Holy shit. Holy shit. Oh, chat, what the fuck? Oh, where are they all gonna come up? Oh, it's like World War Z. They're just gonna pile on top of each other. I used my nades too early. Holy shit. Oh, give me some nades. I know it's not the assault rifle with the sword, but with the chainsaw. But having the chainsaw sword also gives it like the Gears vibes. Oh, I survived until activation's complete. Somehow. Oh shit. Chat, this is not good. I'm blowing myself up. I wish I didn't say up.
Attention. Magos. Your launch authorization is required for dispatch of payload.
Whew. Pretty difficult. Gotta keep an eye on the time. That's cool.
It is done.
Oh, now they go down in one shot. Oh, is he gonna die? He's so gonna die. Rip. I noticed I don't have a health bar or
I
anything.
will not rest until you lie dead at my feet. Even if I am slain, I will leave you with wounds by which you will remember me.
I don't have an ammo thing either. I think this is just survive as long as I can, but I'm not gonna heal.
We will eradicate your kind from the galaxy.
I'm not going down without a fight, though. That's for sure. God, they just don't stop.
May that virus strip your flesh.
Holy shit, what are you? I don't think I was supposed to be able to kill that thing. Well, I tried my best. I certainly didn't go down without a fight. You just get saved. Yeah, it's fun, and I heard the multiplayer is awesome. Oh, and Ricky, if you get it, we can do the co-op missions too, which will be sick. So if you're getting that, hell yeah, that's something else we can play together. Now we got to play Spectre Divide if my internet's gonna work. Holy shit, that was sick. This is fun. Now I see why there's so much hype. Just that first mission alone. Kaduku's orbit. Battle barge resilient. Day 4, 04/22/56.
Praise the Emperor.
He survived.
The wound was fatal.
But
You survived only through the Rubicon surgery. We remade you.
what's that?
You are a Primaris now.
What does that mean?
Why?
Lord Calgar issued the command himself.
Is he here?
Gone. Summoned by the Primarch.
I must get back to the Watch Fortress.
You have been reassigned.
My place is with the Death Watch.
The Inquisition can find no stain on you, Titus, accused of heresy. You have served penance in the Death Watch for almost a century, and not once have you faltered. But you will never know redemption until you have faced the judgment of your brothers. Prove yourself to us, and know true absolution. What is your life?
My honor is my life.
What is your fate?
My duty is my fate.
What is your fear?
My fear is to fail.
What is your reward?
My salvation is my reward.
What is your craft?
My craft is death.
What is your pledge?
My pledge is of allegiance.
Is eternal service.
He's gonna serve forever? Warhammer 4000 Space Marine 2. I can't wait to play.